Hey everyone, Spicy Toast Gaming here. Hope you're having a great day. Hope this video can make it a little bit better for you. Today we're finally doing our Nautilus guide. If you can tell from my background, I'm in a different location. That's because we moved houses and that kind of delayed the Nautilus guide. So apologies that this is a little bit later than normal. But let's just go ahead and jump right in. So Nautilus, he is a new Bilgewater champion that just got added with his full Constellation. He is a 7-cost champion, so pretty pricey. He has a 0-12 stat line and he has Fearsome and Tough. Now, important to note, baseline, he does not have Deep or Sea Monster as any sort of tag or keyword. Now, when you are Deep, I level up, copy tossed allies that cost 4 or more back into your deck. So there's a lot to unpack right here. For one, let's go over Deep. So I have 3/3 once your deck has 15 or fewer cards in it. Now, important to know, this says has had, so you just have to hit that 15 or less cards once. If you go back above that amount, your Deep doesn't go away. So you just have to get down there, but if you fill your deck back up, you are totally fine. Now, Nautilus himself, he doesn't have Deep, so he's not going to get this 3/3, but other units that have Deep will have. Now, let's go over Toss. So obliterate these non-champion cards. You can't get rid of champion cards, but any other cards that get obliterated from the bottom of your deck. So these weren't cards that you were really going to draw anyways, so when it pops up and shows you what gets obliterated, that's going to be important to know to not expect to see those cards, but know it was taken from the bottom of your deck anyways. But there's going to be cards that are obliterating cards from your deck. Now, this is important because by getting rid of those cards, you're then able to get below that 15 threshold in order to trigger that Deep. So these work very well together. Now, once you hit that Deep threshold, Nautilus levels up. Hey, Editor Toast here with just one quick note I forgot to mention. When Nautilus does level, he now copies tossed allies that cost 4 or more back into your deck. So even though you are hitting Deep, you're going below that 15 threshold. When you play Nautilus, any of those cards are then returned into your deck. So normally he's going to help you shoot back up above that 15 amount. And this also helps you not have to worry too much about all the cards that you are tossing because you're going to get a good amount of those, at least a lot of the units, back. He now goes to a 13/13, and now Sea Monster allies cost 4 less. This is going to play very similar to like a leveled up Aatrox or leveled up Aurelion Soul that pretty much have the same sort of aspect of you level, and then suddenly you can play all these similar cards for a lot cheaper. And do note this can stack, so if you have 2 Nautilus on the board, then these both can give you that cost reduction. So you can get up to 8 cost reduction with double Nautilus, but that is going to be pretty rare. Now, his champion spell is the Riptide, 4 cost, fast speed, stun an enemy. Pretty expensive, but you also have this bonus part. Place that unit into the enemy deck if you have a Nautilus. So if you have a Nautilus on your board and then play this, it's not only stunning the unit, it's recalling it into their deck, not their hand. So they can't just immediately replay it. They have to try to get that card back out of their deck. So this gives you a really good control/removal. And so this is his champion spell. Now let's briefly go over the starting deck. Important thing to note here, as you can see, you have 3 copies of all of these cards. Every other champion, you only get 2 copies of your starting deck, the cards in here. For Nautilus, you have 3, which is important to note because otherwise when you start the game, you normally start like 18 cards. So after you draw cards, you'd immediately hit Deep. And often, since you have some toss mechanics, you'd often just run out of cards. So with Nautilus, you get 3 copies, so you have a bigger starting deck than literally every other champion in the game. Now let's go over some of your cards. So we have Dredgers right here. 1 cost, 3/2. When I'm summoned, toss 3. So this is obliterating 3 cards from the bottom of your deck to help you hit that Deep. Now, important to note, the whole value of this card is when you summon it. So with it just sitting on the board, it's not really doing anything for you. So if you need a card to throw away, use as a blocker, anything like that, this is the perfect card for you. You play it, you get its effect, its bonus, and then you can get rid of it. Here we have the Grumble Slug, so 2 cost, 2/3 attune. This also gets Diving Helmet, so Deep, and I am a Sea Monster. So this, once you hit that Deep threshold, this is able to get a whole bunch of extra stats, and it gets even more stats from the star powers I'll get into later. This is a great card for you, and note with this one, you normally don't want to get rid of it until after you trigger that Deep because it gets just so many extra stats. So if you have this and like your Dredgers and need to put up a blocker that you know is going to die, always better to just get rid of your Dredgers first. Try to keep your Grumble Slug alive if you can and any of your other Deep units, because if you can keep them on the board and then trigger your Deep, you're just going to get so much more value out of them. Next up, we have Heavy Metal, 2 cost, slow, although this does get upgraded to Burst. Destroy a unit's equipment and deal 2 damage to it. Now, in the Constellation that we'll get into after this, this can go up to 4 damage. This is fine for a lot of the like earlier or mid-range adventures. When you get into higher end, like the 5 and 6 star adventures, normally this isn't really worth it. And while I generally love cards that have some extra utility, almost none of the opponents have equipment, so this part is generally always useless. So you're just doing this for a little bit of damage, and it's fine as a little bit of damage tool, but especially in those later end adventures, probably want to cut this because it's normally just not doing enough. Next up then we have Hired Gun, so 2 cost, 4/3, when summoned grant the strongest enemy vulnerable. This is just a general fine card, but doesn't really have any special synergies with you. So this is again one of the cards you want to be cutting first. And again, if you need a unit to put up as like a blocker, put this one up as a blocker first instead of the Grumble Slug, because again, you want to keep this unit alive as long as you can. Next up, we have Lure. This is excellent. So 3 cost burst speed, reduce the cost of sea monster allies everywhere by 1. So just massive amount of cost reduction, and then draw a sea monster. Now, as a little bit of a spoiler, your 6-star is able to summon a copy of a unit on the board when you draw it out. We'll get into the specifics later, but you can use this to guarantee that you're going to pull out a sea monster, which then can get summoned on your board if that effect hasn't already triggered. Also, later on, you can get Nautilus to count as a sea monster, so this can also count to reduce him down and potentially draw him out as well. Overall, in general, just a great card for you. We have Salvage, so 3 costs with that Mana Potion, toss 2 and draw 2. Now, this is excellent because when you're drawing a card, you're taking it out of your deck, so you're reducing down your deck size, and then tossing is also doing that as well. And with the star powers we'll get into after this, when you draw, you also toss. So this is actually ending up tossing 4 cards and then drawing 2. So you're essentially reducing down the size of your deck by 6. So overall, this is just excellent for you. Next up, we have Beast Below. Solid Sea Monster, 4 cost, 4/4. Gets that Overwhelm and Tough, and it has Deep. So while it has a decent stat line baseline, this can get to be very, very big. Next up then, we have Devourer. So 6 cost, 6/6, Deep. Play Obliterate an enemy with less health than me. Now, Obliterate isn't just a normal kill. This just completely removes the card from the game. So any special effects like Last Breath effects or anyone that tries to revive units that died this round don't work. Because technically the unit doesn't die, it's just gone from the game. It's obliterated, it's completely gone. So this is a really good card, great removal for you. And while this unit has decent stats, since it is deep, it can get a lot bigger, which means it can then take out bigger threats. Also, since this scales with health, you can work on kind of whittling down a bigger target and then drop this to obliterate them and finish them off. Overall, just a great card for you. And then we have Nautilus. Overall, it is a very solid starting deck. The Hired Gun and Heavy Metal are the first 2 that you want to be cutting because they don't have that great of synergy with the rest of your deck or Nautilus himself, but overall, pretty good. Taking a look at the Constellation now, we'll go over the powers and then we'll kind of break down the order you want to be going through this and the layout. So up first, Deep gives an additional 1/1 for every 10 cards you've drawn or tossed. So the more you're drawing, the more you're tossing, the more stats your Deep is getting. Now, normally Deep is just giving you units 3/3 once they hit the Deep threshold of hitting 15 or fewer cards, but these extra stats will actually be giving your Deep units those stats immediately. So as you're drawing or tossing more, your Deep units are just getting bigger and bigger before you actually hit the Deep threshold. Now for the Endless March, the 2-star, +1 starting mana until you're Deep, so this will shut off once you actually hit Deep. When you draw a card, toss 1. So you want to be completely building around draw. You want to get as much as it from possible, whether that's through powers or especially card pickups and like the shop and things like that. Because when you're drawing, you are also tossing. So that's great, both to synergize with your 1 and 3-star to give your units more stats, but again, it's helping you hit that Deep. Also, we have Game Start, toss until your deck has 40 cards. So if you go above 40 cards, doesn't matter, you'll toss any extra cards to bring you back down to 40. So if you want, you can go for a strategy where you fill up and get a ton of cards, and then you'll toss a whole bunch at the start of the game, which gives you just a massive amount of stats. I don't think that's necessarily the best strategy because you really want to keep your deck as refined as possible to make sure you're pulling out the cards you need, because otherwise you can be a little bit too inconsistent. But it is a fun little gameplay gimmick that you can do. It helps just give you consistency because you know the maximum amount of cards you're ever going to have to deal with is 40. Now for your 3-star, it's just a doubling of the 1-star. Deep gives an additional 1/1 for every 5 cards you've drawn or tossed, so you're able to just really ramp up your units. Now for your 4-star, you have your Nexus is tough. Since you are a bit of a slower champion, this is able to give you a good amount of survivability, because now anytime someone hits your Nexus, it's taking 1 less damage from that hit. And there's a lot of enemies, especially enemy modifiers, that are able to just ping your Nexus for 1 damage. And so this just completely nullifies it. For example, the Swain Adventure, they do a ton of chip damage, and this just completely shuts that down. For the 5-star, we have Mana Flow, Game Start, get a Mana Gem. And then for the 6-star right here, each round, the first time you draw or toss a unit with cost less than or equal to your Mana Gems, create a copy in play. So this is doing a lot of different things for you. For one, this is scaling with your mana. So any way you can increase your mana, this is then increasing the size of the unit you can pull out and get summoned for free. One thing to note though, this isn't just playing the card for you, it's creating a copy of it in play, so on your board, but it's just a copy. So you still have the other copy in your hand. So you're getting a free copy of it, and then you can play that other copy as well. And again, this is synergizing with drawing or tossing. So pretty much every round, you're just going to be getting a free unit. But there are some things you can play around with this. Like we said with the lure, if this hasn't activated yet in your round, you can then play your lure, guarantee you're pulling out a sea monster, and then as long as it is equal or less than your mana cost, you can then get that for free. Also, very important to note, this says unit, not follower. So this can pull out champions if you're lucky. Let's next go over the bonus stars. So Nexus Health and Regen, really good, just general defensive. Star of Legends, your support champions have diving helmet, so they get deep and sea monster. Really good, because then they can benefit from all of this extra scaling. And then your effects that also go for sea monsters. Here we get the Star Blessing. Heavy Metal gets charged in Sigil rank 2. Good. This will especially help it in some of those earlier adventures, but still later on in like the 5 and 6 stars, the 4 damage isn't normally going to be enough. This Star of Discovery, this is very, very important. So sea monster followers you acquire in adventures have Great Club, so they get Overwhelm, really important since these are going to be massive units. And then non-sea monster followers you find in adventures that cost 4 or more get the diving helmet, so they become sea monsters and get that deep. This is really nice, pushing you towards not only getting more sea monsters, but then just getting 4 or higher cost units, since they will count as sea monsters. Next up then, we get the Star of Wonder. So your Riptide, your champion spell, gets Summoning Beacon. So when you play it, you're then summoning a 4 cost unit, decent upgrade, and then all the rest are just your gemstone powers. Now, taking a look at the layout, down here, this is your 1, 2, and your 3-star. And then from here, you can go up and get your 4-star if you have the resources, or you can come down and get the Star of Discovery. Now, this is one of the most important upgrades to get, so the fact that this is right after your 3-star is excellent. Now, after here, you can head down and get the Heavy Metal upgrade. Generally, I would get this later. You probably want to skip this and then head over here. Nexus Health Regen, really good. Just general powers, increasing your survivability to a pretty good amount. Now, again, you could go down here and get the Riptide. It has Summoning Beacon. Again, a decent upgrade. I would say it has more value than the Heavy Metal, but still probably something you want to get later. Down here, these are just the gemstones, so you can kind of avoid them. Up here, then, you get the 5-star, and then after that, we have the one for support champions getting Diving Helmet. It does suck that this one is locked behind the 5-star. That is pretty rough, but it's the only thing that's locked behind a star power, so at least there's that. And then we get the 6-star. So overall, pretty good layout. After your 3-star, you can get the 4 and 5-star if you have the resources, but generally you probably want to come down here, get the upgrade for your sea monsters, get the Nexus Health and Regen, and then you can kind of choose where you want to go. Both the 4 and 5-star are good. You might want to come over and get the 5-star first. That way you can get the upgrade for your support champions. But overall, pretty good laid out Constellation, although it does suck that one of your nodes is locked behind a star power. Now let's take a look at relics. We'll start off with what I think is his best build, and then we'll go back through like common, rare, and talk further about some of the epic relics. Now first, let's go over his relics. So right here, this Treasures of the Deep. Deep, and I am a sea monster. By default, Nautilus doesn't have this keyword and subtype, so him getting the deep means he's going to be absolutely massive, because then he's getting all those extra stats. And the sea monster means he can count towards some of the other effects, like the lure that gives you sea monster cost reduction. When I'm summoned, so it's a summon effect, not a play effect, meaning you can cheese this by doing a lot of other abilities that can resummon units. So whether that is Stabilize, Shadow Totem, the LeBlanc Mirror Image, there's a good variety of things that can summon multiple copies. Any of those will work for this. But when I'm summoned, if you aren't deep, toss equal to my cost. Now, this is his current cost, not his base cost. So if you reduce down Nautilus, this will reduce down the amount you are tossing. In general, though, this is really good. You can drop your Nautilus, he'll toss a whole bunch and get you either deep or very close to it. So overall, very good relic. And honestly, the more I've played with it, the more I have appreciated it. Next, we have the Beast Within Power Allies of Overwhelm. If they have a subtype 1/1, most of your units are going to be trying to have that sea monster subtype, so you'll get the extra 1/1 in stats. Then making sure pretty much all your units or all of your units have Overwhelm is really good. And then Starforged Gauntlets, just for the extra mana. Obviously, it's very good for you, especially if you have them at 6 stars. Now, taking a look at common relics, if you want to level him up as fast as possible, just go for the Cosmic Blessings, either the Greater or Normal. If you don't have the Cosmic Blessings, you probably just want to go for the Star Child Staff. Starting with 5 extra regen is really good, especially early on when you have very little Nexus health. Or just go for the Z Drive for the extra rerolls. A lot of the other ones were for like the stats, extra copies, not really as needed for Nautilus. As far as rare relics, I actually really like Crown Guard Inheritance when I level up Rally. Nautilus has a very strong level up effect since he then gets all these extra stats and then you can play a whole bunch of your sea monsters. So his level up is very strong. Being able to immediately attack when he levels is excellent. Normally he levels when you play him as well, so you can just have this massive swing in tempo. To pair with this, going for the Blade Rack or the Troll King's Crown to give all your units either Challenger or Overwhelm is really nice. That can really be up to personal preference, especially if you have the upgrade in your Constellation where all your sea monsters are getting the Overwhelm. Going for the Challenger could be better. And for the last one, I really like going for Grand General's Counterplan. Round start, create a copy of me in hand. Now, he has to be on the board for this to activate, but with Nautilus, you can struggle with kind of running out of things to play. If you haven't been able to get enough draw cards, or if maybe they all got tossed, you can struggle where you're not deep yet, and you just don't have anything to play, so you're just waiting for your one card you draw every round. Grand General's Counterplan is great to make sure you have something to play every round. And then his Riptide, great for being able to get rid of enemy targets. You're recalling them into their deck, and you can get Summoning Beacon on this, so this is giving you a unit. Overall, this is kind of my favorite rare relic build for him. I will note with the Gravedigger Spade, round start, draw 1, give it fleeting. This sounds good because it's giving you extra draw, but normally with Nautilus, by the time you play him, you're very likely deep or close to deep, and sometimes you don't want to have too much draw once you hit that point because you don't want to run out of cards to play. So having extra draw then can be a little bit of a mixed bag, whereas Grand General's Counterplan is just creating a new card for you, and it's also shuffling a copy back into your deck to make sure you're not running out of cards. So I like Grand General's Counterplan over Gravedigger Spade, but this is one that, especially if you're noticing you're struggling to hit deep even when you play your Nautilus, this could be a good alternative for you to put that right there. As far as Epic Relics, Black Shield is solid to make sure you're able to get all your units at Spell Shield. Cease and Desist will only work if your Nautilus is leveled, but if you want to get a really big attack with him, especially if you make sure he has Overwhelm, could be fun as well. Cruel Experiments, if you don't have the Beast Within, and you still want to get that Overwhelm, this can be another alternative for you. Disciple of Shadows, I normally don't really like going for too much cost reduction with Nautilus. For one, if you're using his relic, it kind of diminishes the result, but also with Nautilus, playing him early doesn't do too much for you if you're not already deep, because then essentially all you're getting is a massive blocker, and then you're very easy to get killed by certain effects that enemies have, where they just kill 0 power units. So cost reduction, normally not what I go for Nautilus. Now, Found Fortune or Portal Pals, both of these can be decent for you. Play, draw the highest cost card that costs less than my base cost, grant an epic item. Since you're a really expensive champion, this can pull out normally a very big sea monster for you that you can play for free. And Portal Pals, again, creating 2 big units for you that you'll be able to play for free or heavily cost reduced. These are all solid. Now, Frozen Tomb, this one is actually pretty good for you. Game start, if I'm in hand or deck, create a Stormcarp Spire with countdown 4, summon me. So this creates this landmark on the board that's going to summon your Nautilus after a couple rounds. This can be really good, just make sure you get your Nautilus on the board. If you're playing with his champion spell, this is a summon effect, so even though he gets summoned from the Frozen Tomb, this will still trigger, giving you a whole lot of toss. And you could pair it with like a Portal Pals, which again is a summon effect. So Frozen Tomb, Nautilus is actually one of the champions that could utilize it pretty well. Last up then for rare relics we haven't highlighted yet, Stack Deck. So this can pair really well with your 2-star. So it gives you 200 starting gold, so you have more money to spend in shops, which often you do want to be looking for a lot of different cards in shops, so either sea monsters or a draw, but we'll get more into cards to look out for later. Power, allies have 1/1 for every 12 cards in your deck past 18 at game start. Now remember, Nautilus gets 3 copies of all of his starting deck cards, as opposed to the 2 that every other champion gets. So you're starting with a bigger deck by default. Also with Nautilus's 2-star, it doesn't matter how many cards you have, you're going to toss all the way down to 40. So you could fill up Nautilus with a whole bunch of cards, get down to 40, you're tossing all those, which is giving you a whole bunch of stats from your 3-star. The stack deck is also triggering first before you toss them all to also give your units a whole bunch of stats. So if you just want the biggest units possible, stack deck can actually work out pretty well for you. Now, I don't think it's necessarily the best to go for this, because I think with Nautilus, it's actually a little bit of a bait, and you really want to actually be cutting a lot of the cards that don't work out well for you. And so making sure your deck is actually a little bit more narrow and consistent, I think is better than just trying to fill up with as many cards as possible. But stack deck can be a good option for you. Nautilus utilizes it better than almost any other champion. All right, that's it for relics. Let's go ahead and take a look at what powers you want to look for, cards to look out for, support champions, and finish off with his rankings. All right, take a look at some powers now. Up first, here on the left, we have Proper Offering. So round start, summon a Sigil of the Storm. This is one of the new powers that just got added in this patch. And these Sigils of the Storm, it's a stackable landmark that gives you cost reduction for your Titanic units. So any units that have 8 health or power or higher. For Nautilus, he's able to count for this, and then you also have many other big units as well. So this is just really nice, giving you some cost reduction to get some of your bigger units on the board early. Then we have Flexible Game Plan, Game Start, Draw 2. Really excellent. Always good to get some extra draw, but especially for Nautilus, because draw gives you more toss. So this is really good right there. Then we have Crush, Allies of Overwhelm. You can get the Overwhelm from other sources if you have like some of the upgrades in the Constellation, or you have like Beast Within or some other relics. So you don't always need this, but especially while you're leveling up, and if you don't have some of those upgrades yet, this is really, really good for you. Next up then, Fast Deal, round start, draw 1, give it fleeting. When you discard a card, create a copy of it in your deck. Now you want to minimize that second part as much as possible, so you don't really want to discard any cards, and fleeting cards are discarded at the end of the round. So you want to minimize that aspect of it as much as possible, but extra draw is really good for you. Extra draw means extra toss, and so overall this is a net positive for you. Memory Game, round start, create a fleeting copy of the last non-fleeting card you played. This is really good because in these card games, often you'll have some cards you pick up that are very, very powerful that you want to play multiple times. If you're smart with it, you can play that as the last card in a round, and then you get an extra copy of it next round. So really good, and it helps minimize your biggest weakness of being a little bit inconsistent and running out of things to play. Getting an extra card to play every round is very helpful. Then we have the Dawning Age. This is again one of the new powers that just got added this patch. Round start, reduce the cost of all 4+ cost cards in hand by 1. You are going to be trying to stack up a lot of cards that cost 4 or more, so this is just giving you a good amount of cost reduction. Next up there, Trifarian Might. When you summon a 5+ power ally, it strikes the weakest enemy. You're going to have a lot of units that can trigger this, and so this just gives you a lot of extra removal. Stabilize. When you play a champion, summon an exact ephemeral copy of it. Pretty much always a good power. But if you're using the Nautilus relic, this is one of the ways you can trigger extra summon effects. You can double the amount of toss you're getting. So especially if you're using his relic, this is a must get. Then lastly here we have Hold It, round start, stun the strongest enemy. Really good defensive power. Pretty much any of the defensives you can pick up. So any stuns or frostbites or like enfeebling, any of that is going to be good for you. You are a little bit of a slower ramp champion, so having some tools like this to help just delay the game is very solid. Taking a look at support champions now. As always, not a exhaustive list, but just some things to consider and keep in mind. So up first, we have draw. Pretty much the most important thing for you to look out for in everything, whether that's power, cards, just any way you can get it. Draw is very good for you. Also, 4 or higher cost units, also excellent. And then lastly, toss. Any cards that get toss on them, or any support champions that can give you toss, which there's only like one, but that's going to be good. So up first, we have Twisted Fate. He's a 4-cost unit. I think he has probably more draw than like any other support champion baseline. So that is excellent for you. Next up, we have Maokai. Pretty much the only other champion that has toss as a core part of their kit. And then lastly, kind of a special shout out, we have Katarina. I think that E is supposed to be an A, but we'll ignore that for now. Katarina is pretty fun because you can get the upgrade where your support champions count as sea monsters. And then for Katarina, when she levels, she is able to trigger that rally and get recalled. If you have Nautilus leveled on the board, he gives you cost reduction for sea monsters, which is 4 cost reduction. Katarina, when she leveled, is a 4 cost, so you can essentially get an infinite combo with Katarina, which can be pretty fun. In general, though, you don't necessarily have to look for specific champions. Any champions that get items on them that give you extra draw, whether that is when I'm summoned, draw a card, whether that is when I'm summoned, draw a spell, whether it's Farsight, Hero's Horn for champion draw, just any of those on the cards for the support champions is very, very good. And then also there's a lot of champions where either them or their support package has those 4 or higher cost units. Any of those will be solid for you. Next then, let's take a look at cards to look out for. So it's pretty much the big immediate takeaways is any cards with draw, any cards with toss, and then any sea monsters. So let's go through here. So here on the left, we have Pool Shark. When I'm summoned, draw 1 at next round start, granted fleeting. Shadow Totems, you're drawing 2 extra cards next round. That's great because that draw is giving you toss. Here we have Undergrowth, and just any of the Shadow Isles or Maokai support package you generally want to pick up. But toss 3, drain 2 from a unit, and it says the Emperor's deck. Really good because there's some good draw cards in there, but then just generating more cards so you don't run out of things to play is very good. Megatusk, Sea Monster, Deep. When you're deep, heal your allies in Nexus 3. Pretty much any Sea Monster you want to consider getting, and it's also got some cost reduction there from the ante-up, so you could pretty much play this even at the start of the game. Vicious Plate Worm, again, a Sea Monster, so just for that aspect, you probably want to consider grabbing it. Rummage, just a very random draw card, but it gives you a lot of draw, so pretty much worth picking up for that. The Shipwreck Hoarder, so deep, when I'm summoned, toss 2 and create 2 treasures in your deck. So this, you probably just want to get it baseline because it's a sea monster, but it's tossing 2 and giving you 2 treasures. Now the treasures are very important because when they get tossed, instead of getting obliterated, they get added to your hand. And generally all of the treasures are worth playing because they're very strong. Like there's one that summons 3 of the Vicious Plate Worms you see right here, just summons 3 of them for you, which is absolutely massive. So that's also one thing to look out for. Any spells that focus, or any cards that focus on treasures, probably worth grabbing. Then we see Lost Riches, draw a treasure. If there aren't any to draw, you could then create 2 in your deck. Now you generally want to avoid creating units in your deck because that's fighting against your deep, but for treasures, it is worth it. And this also came with Emperor's Favor. It's giving you one of those cards in hand, which is just making sure you don't run out of things to play. Now to finish off with his rankings, I think before level 20, he's probably like a C tier champion, and even like lower C tier. I didn't quite have the heart to put him in the D tier, but he is lower down there, so I'd say like low C tier. I think after level 20, he's a solid B tier champion. Not crazy good, not crazy bad. As far as some pros for him, he has really good scaling on any of his deep units, and then he also has big units. So anything that costs 4 or more, you're generally wanting to grab and add to his deck. So you're not only getting a lot of scaling, you're also trying to just drop units that are inherently big anyways, which can be a lot of fun. As far as some cons, he does have some issues with inconsistency that through this guide, we're trying to give you as many tips as possible to mitigate that, but that is something that you can potentially deal with. Then he also is a ramp champion, so he's just going to be a little bit on the slower side and just take a little bit longer to get going. Overall, for the regional rankings, I'm putting him in mid, but there is some caveats with that. For one, you have several champions that don't have their Constellation, so Nautilus, I think, is better than like Jack or Tom Kench. But as far as the other champions that do have Constellations, I think Misfortune blows him out of the water. And while he is closer in strength to Pike, I'd still give the edge to Pike as being a stronger champion. So I did put him in the mid ranking here, but if it was just against Constellation champions, he'd probably be the bottom. That's it for the guide though. I hope this was able to help you out. If it did, a like and subscribe is always appreciated, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.